From shuttlecraft to space station, from cosmic anomaly to black holes.
You're listening to
Talara News Network.
Tonight, we have an exclusive broadcast with one of our very own Talarans. Please welcome to the studio, Matthew Blackwell, as the voice of Commander Rhombus in tonight's exclusive interview.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am P.A. Kenny USA, the director and one of the actors for our show, Battle for Talara. Please welcome to the studio, Mr. Matthew Blackwell, aka Rhombus himself. Hello, Matthew. How are you doing this evening?
I am good. Hello, guys and girls. Welcome to the long-awaited interview and questionnaire you guys have been asking for.
All right. So, while we get things quickly set up here, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and stuff like that while we get the interview questions coming in.
Well, my name is Matthew Blackwell, and for all intents and purposes, as many of you probably already know, there's been a lot of struggles that we've had throughout the show and struggles that have made both of us inadvertently rip our hair out. But you all have enjoyed all the things. Some of you have hated some of the things, and we, of course, that of course have affected us. But we didn't let it get us down because we know you guys love the series and everything. And mostly, it's been an up and downhill battle for the emotions, roller coasters we've gone through. Then basically it's had one heck of an impact on my life for the most part. You know, growing up and not having a whole lot of outlets and such, having this particular series, just come out of nowhere and having someone to run it with, and having fans coming out of nowhere, it's going, I love this and I love that, and Rhombus is amazing, and it's, for the lack of better words, it's been a trip, to say the least. A space trip.
Well,
But
okay. Well, we're almost ready here, Rhombus. But or should I say, Matt? How do you want me to call you? Just Matt or Rhombus?
Matt, Rhombus, whichever the fans are comfortable with, and I'm pretty sure they're going to enjoy being called Rhombus. So
Okay.
let's just go with what the fans want.
All right. So, sorry if I interrupted you. Continue.
And there's not really much else to say on terms of my livelihood, because most of the time I was invested in the series itself. There were times when I wasn't too eager to record, but there were times when I couldn't wait to record, I couldn't wait to act, I couldn't wait to show Rhombus to everyone else, and basically put Big Purple Boy in everybody's face and call it good.
All right. So, I mean, that's really interesting, Rhombus. So, I'm going to start asking you a couple questions that we've had prepared from our both our cast, crew, as well as some of our team here at RT Studios Entertainment. First question is from our viewers. Tell our viewers the story behind our beloved four-legged alien friend Rhombus. How did they become such an iconic character in this sci-fi universe of Elite Dangerous?
The start of Rhombus, while graphically was just a simple idea, throughout many of the times that I have watched Kenny play the game, and whether it was months of watching him stream it through Discord or stream it through video calling or whatever, I always had it in my mind that this game is so full of wonderful aspects different planets to explore, different missions to go on, different other players in a vast system of just what seemed like endless places to explore, things to find, and new locations that had surprising plot twists and strange things to discover in each and every area. Many of these aspects is what caused my mind to just begin creating its own fascinating symbols and ideas and concepts for the game. And there was a couple of particular fan arts that I found online that were of, other ideas of other creatures in the game that other players had created and come up with on their own, that I sort of borrowed the aspects and the idealisms of other players in the game and used those as inspiration to create my own unique fictional character. Rhombus at first started out as this simple little tiny speck of an idea that had no basis for anything whatsoever until I spent maybe a couple hours a day thinking it over. And as I began to think more and more about Rhombus, his spectrum of just design and generic look sort of blossomed from this small creature to something that had to be bigger, that had to match the game itself in size. Initially, Rhombus he was going to be bipedal, but I knew that a bipedal species was a very common aspect, a very common theme in a lot of different games. Very rarely in games do you see a species that is intelligent, that is combat ready, that is capable of survival, that is strong, overpowering, or just generically streetwise, but it's quadrupedal, not bipedal. I know of very few games, of very few movies, of very few just comics in general whose intelligent species they're all bipedal. Very few of them have quadrupedal locomotion to themselves. So this aspect of Rhombus being a bipedal creature, it was something unique. Something very unique that I personally thought was just a very creative RP aspect for a fictional species. For the most part, was Rhombus went through probably about 4 different stages of creative thinking. At first, I wanted him to be something simple, something that wasn't too complex, like say a tall, 4-legged, thin creature that would just drift around and wasn't very smart to begin with, but at the same time, I knew that there were vast numbers of planets, there was vast numbers of players, and for players to be interacting with if should this creature even exist to begin with, players are not going to want to interact with some creature that's dumb, because dumb creatures don't do anything. So I decided that it would be best if Rhombus was smart. He was intellectually sound. He was creative with whatever he is. And as my ideas grew with Rhombus, so his shape changed. He went from this thin, tall creature that was animal-like to a humanoid-like centaur kind of creature. And then I decided that it may be best if he was completely devoid of all humanoidism whatsoever. And his third and fourth stages, he became this basically huge centaur-like beast that was. I thought, well, what would be better than a centaur than to have it be aquatic, an aquatic species or semi-aquatic species that thrives in the water and on land, that has fish-like qualities, but not deep sea fish-like qualities. So Rhombus became, this purple-skinned, alien beast-like species with 4 legs, and along with a few inspirational bits from my partner here, uh, we both sat down and decided that he needed to be something completely out of the blue. We sat down and we drew up concept arts and created our own fabrication of what he would actually look like. And as many of you have already seen in the show, various clips and blooper reels and episode intros, Rhombus basically, after just letting it go, Rhombus took on a life of his own. He became our poster boy because the moment he was released to the public, everyone just took to him like a dog to water on a hot day. It was there. It was. So his love and whatnot grew rather quickly because we let fans decide if they wanted to enjoy the way he looked or not.
All right, so that's a very interesting way of describing Rhombus. However, you did mention something about aquatic species, which brings me to a question that wasn't on our list but was asked earlier this evening by one of our fans via our fan mail. And it asks, um, what were the Galarand and what were the concept for that subspecies?
The Galarand essentially were the more deep sea aquatic cousins to the Talarans. See, in the concept of the world itself, Talara was much like Earth, only it had vast more amounts of land and vast greater oceans. The Galarand were a sort of subspecies to the Talarans. They were less evolved, less intelligent. They were more barbaric, but they were deep. Take the anglerfish, if you will, for example. The Galarand were akin to deep sea anglerfish. They thrived in the dark of the deeper ocean parts of Talara. They rarely came out on land. They were significantly dumber. They were less evolved, and they had a generic hatred for the Talarans because they were far more, numerous, and they had greater technology. They were superior in smarts, but at the same time, the Galarand, their concept was we needed something of an anti-hero. The Talarans were supposed to be the dominant species on the planet, but we needed something that would be counteractive to them so they weren't the superior power in that region of space. They needed something of a threat themselves because a hero a hero can't just be a hero unless there's a villain. There has to be a villain because otherwise you're a hero for naught. So in order to give the Talarans that concept of having to defend their right as a superior species, we had to give them an alien species that was similar to them, that would be a grand challenge for them. And this is where the concept of the Gathering came from. We searched, again, similar to Rhombus, we searched for various bits of information. We looked at other various images and concept arts from other people of the various games, and we drew inspiration from those images and started working with our own string of arts. We decided to take the image of Rhombus and sort of tone it down a bit, make it less evolved, make it look more, I guess you could say, slightly demonic, because the Galarand are a pink-skinned variety of the Talarans. And when we dulled it down, changed the color, worked with somehow how the body would look, and then being a less evolved species, they were bipedal. Because they had more fins and they had more ocean survival adaptations to their body, so they rarely came out on land. So we wanted to make sure that they were genuinely an aquatic species. They weren't just coming on land for whatever reason. They would only come on land for one singular purpose, and that was to basically bombard their Tolaran superiors in an attempt to take control of the planet. But it was making the Tolarans was the easier part. It was the Galaran that was the most difficult part, because getting something that looked similar to the Tolarans and then making them generically evil, so to speak, it took us maybe several days longer to work with imaging for the Galarand, and there were many times that we threw away a lot of different images that we worked with, because every so often we'd notice small things that didn't fit the character or didn't fit the species or the imaging, and we wound up tossing it until one day my partner Kenny, he fiddled with it on his own and created something that actually kind of shocked me because I wasn't prepared for it. He showed me the images that he created, and I was like, that's it. That's the Galarand. It matches every distinctive description we have. And as many of you have already seen, you've already seen images of the Galarand. That pink-skinned little monstrosity is the Galarand, and you have Kenny to thank for that. He is the genius behind that particular image. He knew how to manipulate it. He had a spontaneous idea, and it exploded, and it was perfect. So that's where the concept of the Galaran came from. It was an anti-hero, anti-superior, barbaric system meets a order system. Chaos versus order. The Talarans were order, and the Galaran were chaos. And eventually, they were going to clash in the middle. It was inevitable.
Okay, so that's actually very interesting because when we were designing the Galarand, and the initial concept surprisingly was not fin-like at all, but when I was working with Rhombus or Matt here and our team, we were thinking about, well, they are an aquatic species. We need to have some aspects that are a nod to that aquatic lifestyle. So what I did in the initial concept was we had it really, really, really bright pink, or almost a white, off-white pink. And I thought, well, they are dark water species, and for defense mechanisms, they can't be that bright. So what I did is I went into a photo editor, and I basically took the initial concept art, and I just darkened the hue of the character by selecting the area on the character's skin and lowering it to, something a little bit more darker pink. And then I added on a couple extra features, stretched a couple things here and there, and showed it to Matt here, and that was how the Galarand were born. So, let's see, what other questions do we have?
And
go ahead.
Just to clarify, I will be the first to admit, when it comes to photo editing and Photoshop and recording software, I'm the dumb one. I don't know how to do any of that stuff, so I leave it to my partner here, Kenny. He's the whiz behind all the recording, all the editing, all the photo manipulation. So if you guys want to thank somebody for making the images look good, thank this guy right here. He knows what the hell he's doing, because I sure as hell don't.
Thank you. That's great. I really like that. Thank you. But I can't give all the credit to myself because Rhombus is actually the voice behind the story that became so popular. And that brings us to our next question, which is all right. A lot of the preservants, is what the fans have called themselves, have asked us, the production team, what inspired you to choose a quadrupedal-like species when developing the concepts for Rhombus? I guess that was kind of already answered, but if you'd like to elaborate, that'd be great.
I would like to elaborate. See, the reason we chose a quadrupedal species for the main spectrum of it all The land of Talara itself, in concept and in theory, that it wasn't a land that was perfectly suited to a bipedal species. There was many hills, there was mountains, there was really deep valleys with thick brush, there was dense forest, and there was places where a bipedal species would have significant difficulty getting around. And when I first created Rhombus and I had the concept of bipedal species, I took some inspiration from horses. Horses can climb hills, they can climb, not so steep mountains. They're able to go to places where people in general can't go because they're bipedal. Horses have got greater maneuverability on hills and stuff because they have hooves that can basically dig into the ground and get a good grip. Human feet do not grip the ground too well. We have to wear shoes. But horses naturally can grip the ground. They can go to certain areas, like in hilly regions, that we just can't. And so the concept of him being bipedal and him having these slight claws on his feet that let him grip while he is climbing hills and stuff, the power of a quadrupedal species would be significant to the terrain of Talara. And many of the cities on Talara were built around in these small pockets where there was large hills and mountains protecting these cities from the elements. Windstorms, dust storms, sandstorms, torrents of rain. These hills and these mountains, pardon me, they buffeted these storms, keeping the city safe. But at the same time, the generic terrain was just unsuitable to a bipedal species. The bipedal species did not have enough physical strength and power in their legs to climb these jagged hills or climb these rigorous mountains or trudge through these deep, thick, brushed areas like deep valleys and things. The Talarans, with their bipedal bodies and thick muscles on their legs, were able to traverse these terrain with ease because they were far more suited to that terrain than anyone else. Give or take a few adaptations over the years.
All right, that brings us to our next question from this one is from Mike. Uh, I can't pronounce your name, and I do apologize if I butcher it. Uh, Herdzen, Herdson. All right. Mike Herdson asks, "Good morning, Rhombus. I'm curious to know what is a pocky fruit, and what would it taste like if you made it into a cocktail?"
The pocky fruit was the most, I want to say, the most abundant fruit that you would find on Halara. It's similar in availability like oranges, but the pocky fruit was, think of it as a orange sized durian. Durian is green. It has these little spiky lumps on it. Um, but it was the size of an orange,
Kind of
and
like a
it made it
pineapple, right?
kind of like think of it like a pineapple, but as an orange. It was smaller. It was round. Had a really thick hide. Had really sharp points on it. Like you touched your finger to these points, it would definitely bleed. This fruit was very dangerous to handle unless you had some kind of protective gear to harvest it. And I'm sure there's probably people out there who want to know the concept of the whole thing. Uh, we basically combined an orange and a durian, or an orange and a pineapple, and gave it that shape because, again, like Rhombus, like the Galarand, it was something unique. Uh, there's very little concepts of food in the game besides what humans or other players, do for like cargo and such to deliver to different zones and different planets. But with the Talarans, the pocky fruit is like a staple to their diet. Yes, the pocky fruit, when consumed at a certain point during its ripening stages, acts like a narcotic, and they can get high off of it. But when it's fully ripened, it tastes just as sweet as an orange and just as sour as a pineapple, for example. Um, but as for a cocktail, the pocky fruit, when processed into an alcohol, would be just as strong, if not stronger, than 180 proof alcohol here on Earth as a cocktail. In other words, it would definitely knock you on your ass. Uh, Now, as with most cocktails, you usually combine it with a slice of fruit or something on the edge of the glass. The best possible combination to add to this would quite possibly be, I want to say, and this is going to sound really weird, but in order to, change the flavor of it, I would say the best bet would be to add a slice of banana on the rim of your glass. I know that sounds weird, but the poppy fruit is a very pungent fruit. It's very thick and it will bite your tongue when you bite into it. That, to say the least. It would definitely bite your tongue.
All right, that I guess answers question number 9 that we had from uh, Sean Arnolds that asked, I heard about the pocky fruit and its hallucinogenic attributes. Is it a drug?
When the poppy fruit is consumed during its second ripening stage, it starts out as green, then it turns blue, then it turns red. When it's blue, that's its second ripening stage because as the plant is maturing, the fruit starts out as brown. Then it turns green, then it turns blue, red, and finally it turns purple because it has 4 ripening stages. But while it's blue, the second ripening stage, it releases a sort of chemical that is equivalent to, and I don't want to say this um,
Encourage.
to promote anything,
Okay.
but as example, it would be the equivalent of someone taking 3 doses of marijuana all at the same time, uh,
Which we do not
which is
condone.
which we do not condone. We don't condone it at all. But as example, it would be like that all at once, and then the effects hitting you instantly. In its second stage, the poppy fruit would be a very big narcotic type of drug if consumed while it's in its second stage. Um, there have been several instances in the series where Rhombus has, in fact, consumed the poppy fruit in its second stage, had hallucinations, and blacked out. And he was put on on a medical table and monitored because he had consumed poppy fruit before it was ripe. So yes, it can be used as a narcotic if it were real.
All right. That kind of segues into a side question from John Vex, who asks, if the pocket fruit is so dangerous, why aren't there any regulations or government mandates to prohibit its consumption at its second stage?
We never got around to providing a lure for such a regulation. See, the pocky fruit, according to the lore that I created, it was a simple fruit to be farmed to provide fruit and food to low end homes, such as farmland homes, not big city homes. So, because it was provided as a food source to outlying homes that were like in the country area around the cities, and Talarans in the city never actually bothered with pocky fruit. The effects of it were never, you know, regulated because it never entered the city. They didn't allow the pocky fruit to enter the city. So I guess you could say that was a form of regulation. But since Talarans in the major cities didn't purchase pocky fruit and have it, imported into the cities, and it stayed out in the country lands with farmers and small little towns, there was no need for regulation because it wasn't used by big city Talaran to begin with.
All right. Sorry to focus on the pocky fruit, but I guess it's a major topic of interest. James Carlos asks if the pocky fruit, as stated above, was considered or is considered so dangerous. Would it be considered as being sold on the Talaran black market? If there is one, he says.
Well, again, we never got around to making such a market. However, I did want to put in a black market aspect for the series, but it never became a thing because it went from, one moment Rhombus is a simple guard to next he's cascading all over the universe, being an ambassador for his home world, going to various places, doing various missions. But if I were to give the show a black market aspect on Talara, yes, the pocky fruit in its second stage of growth would be a black market item in the city because by then it would be regulated and people or Talarans and whatnot would be dealing with a drug crisis because there was a black market. But since there's not one to begin with, that was never a problem. But that is a good concept. I do like the idea of having a black market with the fruit and selling it at its second stage because then it creates a challenging problem for all the big city elites.
All right, so okay, enough questions about the pocky fruit, but let's see. Oh, here's one that's kind of relevant. Given the social economic strata that we have not yet seen or have not fully dove into in the series, what can you say about the social economic strata for the Talaran species? Is there a government? If so, what castes or clans exist in the universe that hold on. This is a really long question, thank you. What castes and clans in the universe exist that allow the Talarans to live in peace and harmony among so many different types of social castes or classes within their population or populace?
In the aspect of the Talarans, there was in fact a governing body. This, if we had had a chance to show it, would have been the Talaran Emperor. He is subjugated by three initial governing bodies. We'll just, for name's sake, we'll say them A, B, and C. A governing body A was in charge of mandating laws and managing the network of the city and the surrounding country lands. B was involved with social, social diversity among the city, maintaining law enforcement, maintaining security, maintaining guards throughout all the major points in the city. And the third was managing markets such as various shops, imports, exports, gathering resources from outside the city in the ocean or in the forest or wherever. And the emperor was in charge of making sure that all three of these different governing bodies were forced to agree. No one person could have seniority over everything besides him. And should someone step out of line, he could simply just ixnay them and that's it. They're done. And he would appoint someone new to that position should they fail in their job and their duties. The emperor also would have been in charge of interplanetary dictation. And should the people of Talara feel that the Emperor is overstepping his bounds, with a vote from the three governing bodies, A, B, and C, and a full-on voting system that would have been in place, they could vote the Emperor out of his chair and put someone they feel is more comfortable in their chair as the new Emperor.
Interesting. So, sorry to interrupt, but James says, is there a democracy on Talara?
There is a sort of democracy on Talara, but it's limited to only maintaining the influx and outflux of daily commute, daily commission, daily aspects of all the social gatherings that go on in the cities around the country lands. Individuals are allowed to protest, they're allowed to perform in the streets, they're allowed to hold conventions, but the democracy is only supposed to make sure that these individuals are well protected when they're doing their voting or when they're doing their protesting or holding their conventions or having block wide parties or building wide parties, and it basically maintains all of the goings on for any time these events take place. It's there was freedom of expression, there was freedom of speech, there was the right to appeal, and a few other systems that was in place to make sure that these individuals, while they aren't doing anything harmful, they weren't harmed in the process.
All right. Thomas XXXX asks. Okay, interesting. Um, so far in the series, we've only heard one mention of a Talaran female. If this is the case, how many Talaran females exist in the realmscape of Talara? Are Talaran females looked down upon or frowned upon? If so, would there be a chance for any possibility for Talaran female rights, activists activist or movements to occur? Also, are there any gay Talarans on this world? As I am one of my own.
I'll go ahead and I'll break that down. Let's start with the first particular question within the question. The Talarans were, while they were a vast species and vastly intelligent, they also understood that having males and females in the same area consistently caused a lot of problems, especially for the system in place. Many of the cities across Talara were female-only cities. Many of the cities were male-only cities. Male-oriented individuals were prone to outbursts. And the females were significantly weaker than the males because they were smaller and they didn't have as much physical strength. So the females were given their own cities, their own governments, their own democracy, or their own libertarianisms, and they were given their own system, their own caste system, their own authority over how they govern themselves. But when it comes to mating, individuals with greater success rate in their family lineage were allowed to procreate. This included the chances of survival, the ability to learn new skills faster, greater intelligence, uh, advancements in technology. That those who were skilled in areas that benefited the race as a whole were allowed to breed because they would breed children who could learn better and create new and more significant lifestyles that would allow them to it would allow them to grow as a better species. Now, that's not to say that there weren't cities where male and female Talarans did mix
Unisex cities,
on
right?
occasion. These were called
Cohabitants?
no, these were called end cities. And the reason they were called end cities is because these are areas where many of the government aspects of, say, a male dominated city and a female dominated city, these the laws only stretched out so far. They had an end to them. Well, where these cities set that had male and female, it was the end of the road for the law, the bylaws that those other cities, played around with. These cities were more freely open than any other city out there because they had less laws, they had less strict, things like on events or conventions and stuff. They allowed males and females to mix because they wanted to be able to mix and have these interactions. Um, but many of these cities were also under the scrutiny of the emperor. So if he wanted the city to be divided, he could simply send a force in, take all the females, put them back in one city, take all the males, put that back in a city, and that city would be broken down by a planetary team of workers who would then scrap every building, refurbish those buildings, and use the materials for it to build a whole brand new city somewhere else and create a whole new system for that city. Next sub question, please.
All right. Yes, Alex. I'm not going to answer that one because it seems slightly inappropriate.
I mean, the next question in that question.
Oh, okay.
I think they mentioned something about if there are any gay Talarans.
Yes, they did. They
Um,
are one themselves. Well, not a Talaran, but they are,
that's perfectly fine. And yes, it's not that the Talarans themselves that they were particularly gay Talarans, but many males and females that were subjected to being in cities by themselves, they did form relationships with each other as a coping mechanism because a lot of males would feel distanced from the females and they couldn't, have that interaction. But many of the males would find, and a lot of times in nature, with animals here on Earth, they would find the companionship and love they would get from mating with another male. A lot of these relationships would last for decades, sometimes longer than decades, sometimes a few hundred years. But then when it came time to actually mate with a female and procreate, it was just a one-stop shop. They would go, mate, children are born, eggs are left to hatch, they grow up, and then they're separated based on male and female. Or they could choose to go to a mixed city, and then they were allowed to leave and be their own individual Talaran. Um, but I guess you could say yes, there was a few, males and females who decided that they didn't want interaction with a female. They chose to stay with their male partner, their female partner, and just live out their lives as a genuine couple in their respective cities.
Brian asks, you mentioned something about eggs. Is there such thing as an egg bank or a donor bank for Talarans?
There wasn't a donor bank, but there was a storage bank for said eggs. When males and females went to mate, if we had a chance to put it in the story, males and females would have gone to what's called a grove, and they would have mated there. A caretaker in the grove would have stored the eggs in a place where it was slightly damp, with maybe a little bit of maybe a water pool here and there, some forestry, and would have taken care of the eggs until they were hatched. And then from the grove, the caretaker would have trained the babies, let them grow up to a certain age, and then send certain ones to a city, send another certain group to the city, and then whichever younger ones wanted to choose, they would choose to go to a mixed city. In there, they could potentially find a parent or parents to raise them if they so chose to. Many males in a dominated city would take on younger males and raise them as their own in the city, and then vice versa in the female dominated cities as well.
I hope that answers your question, Brian. So just to kind of elaborate on that, Brian, you asked, so basically it is like, yes, it is exactly like a democratic version of adoption. You choose your family Mother and father, yes. All right.
Pretty much, yes. The babies were allowed, the youngsters were allowed to choose their parents, but if they wished to be on their own, then they were given the freedom to be on their own and do their own thing wherever they wished to. Granted, without a parent to guide them, it would have been significantly harder, growing up, because as a youngster, there wild animals, various wild animals would have preyed on the younger ones without some kind of parent to guard them. But they choose that at their own risk. And that's what I like about the way I gave the Talarans their storyline is I didn't want individuals to be pressured to be forced into a family if they didn't choose to be in a family. They have the sole right to say, I want to be on my own. I don't care about a family or a father or a mother. I feel that I'm strong enough to handle myself. I'm going to do what I want and be where I want to be. And as far as like the children are concerned, every one of them had this freedom to do that. They had the freedom to choose to go where they wanted to, which city they wanted to be in, and whatnot. If they chose to be in a male-dominated city, if they chose to be in a female-dominated city, that was their freedom of choice to do that. And I wanted all the Talarans to have that life choice freedom because it made more sense to let someone choose on their own rather than being forced into it.
All right. Well, we only have about maybe a couple more minutes to ask questions to Rhombus here, but I'm gonna just kind of go off the list and do a couple quick ones. We're gonna do a speed round. Rhombus, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's let them questions flow.
All right. First question: what's Rhombus's favorite color?
Rhombus's favorite color, believe it or not, is red.
Okay. Rhombus's favorite holiday in
If
Talaran
Rhombus had a
culture.
favorite in Talaran culture, it would have to be the festival of this is going to sound really weird, but the festival of pocky fruit. And to emphasize on that, Festival of Pocky Fruit is a celebration of the first day the pocky fruit was discovered on the planet by the settlers who settled there.
How old is Rhombus?
That right there is a spicy question. Believe it or not, Rhombus is actually 246 years old. Because a lot of Talarans they don't spend their time, you know, they spend most of their time consistently active. They stay active. They're always going somewhere. They're light sleepers. They spend their time growing, advancing, and basically keeping things going. Their bodies have adapted to maintaining constant motion. So they don't suffer wear and tear. They don't suffer a lot of pain, and they get over things quickly because they heal quickly. And when you heal quickly, things tend to stay firm and fresh, and you just keep on going.
All right. Who would win in a sparring match? A Talaran or a Galarand? This is a tough one.
And a hand to hand, a no holds barred sparring match where it's just all out fist fight. The Tolarans would most likely win because even though the bipedal species could get around the Talaran is not afraid to use their hands or their feet to fight with. So it's a lot harder to dodge 4 feet than two.
All right, and two more questions. Let's see. Uh, does Rhombus have any hair? And if he did have hair, what kind of style would he wear it in?
Rhombus, unfortunately, like the Gellerbrand, are a hairless species. But if he did have hair, it would be more like wispy feather like hair. And it would most likely be at best combed back along his skin and brushed down with an oil to keep it slick because, feathers or hair creates wind resistance while they're going about their daily lives and it would slow them down.
All right, and one last question, which we will ask is Okay, so Michael asks, Matt, if you were to meet Rhombus in the flesh at this very moment given today, what would you do? How would you react? And what would you say to him?
What would I do? I would probably be over the hills, ecstatic. My reaction would be of sheer shock and surprise. And as for what I would do, I would most likely ride Rhombus like a horse and gallop all over the hills. Just to put it bluntly, because let's face it, he's a massive, massive alien species. Who would not put a saddle on him and ride him over the hill?
Of course, with his consent, right?
Of course, with his consent, but it's still that's the gist of it.
All right. Well, thank you, Rhombus, for joining us for this interview. Are there anything else you'd like to say to the fans?
There
Or
is one thing I would like to say to the fans, and this is a very important aspect of this whole thing.
go ahead.
My fellow adventurers, I, Matt B., also known as your Commander Rhombus, today I would like to reach out to all of you and give you a Talara-sized thank you. Each and every one of you deserve nothing less than the biggest praise and admiration. And because of that, I will say this. I, myself, have struggled through many pains, fears, and doubts in my life. But since first stepping off the beaten path and creating this series with my running partner, Patrick Kinney, and garnering the rise and loving fans, you all, my own confidence has had a huge boost over the course of this entire, from episode 1 to the last episode, up into the upcoming events we have planned for you guys. Being exposed to such a grand fan base like you all has done not only a great deal for me, but for Kenny as well. Every one of you are the most incredible, beautiful, and loving people any character could ask for. From start to finish, since stepping down that gravel road and ending up on a planet far away, all of you and your vast love for Rhombus, Kenny, the Talarans, and the game has helped us see a world of people we never knew existed. All of you are the true heart of the show. It has thrilled all of us here at Real Time and Magnum Rim Productions to know we made you smile with plot twists, cliffhangers, and every surprising scene we threw at you. So to all the fans who stepped up, owned it, and gave it your all, I thank you. And I hope you will continue playing the game and persevering to find all of its hidden secrets.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Myself, Patrick Kenny, aka Commander Kenny Williams, and our interviewee for tonight and special guest, Matthew Blackwell, the voice of Rhombus. We'll see you next time on Talaran News. Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great night.